homes where they have to endure them for 24 hours a day, as you've said, and Councillor Taylor, it's really not on. So I think the reforms that the government's doing are long overdue, and we'll talk about that later, but that's no help to anybody around here. Our two MPs are really enthusiastic. They will move as quickly as they can on the Resource Management Act reforms, but the definition between a road reserve and your responsibility for that road reserve still lies within local government. Who is responsible for what? And does the road reserve define what is a berm and a footpath? That's one of the questions you need to ask somebody. I think, sir, you've had enough from me, but I do hope you got the message. I'm relying on you, Mayor Drysdale, to actually make sure that you influence something that's of great concern to a great many people.
Thank you very much for your time today and coming and supporting the community. Appreciate it. Next up, we have Susie Edmonds, and she will talk about a range of topics. You'll have 5 minutes, including questions. Thank you, Susie.
We're on. I'm not as cheerful as those people, and I'm not here with such a nice speech, really. Today, I'd like to say thank you very much for having me here at this late notice, because I think I sent the request in last night, so that's very decent of whoever was doing that. And I'd like to begin. I want to make something very clear in the beginning, and this is that my statement is not personal. My stand is not against individuals. It is against bad deals, poor consultation, and wrong decisions that are made deliberately, not by mistake. We all make mistakes, however, that must be challenged when processes are designed to shut people out, hide facts, or mislead communities. I asked to speak today about consultation, engagement, communications, and complaint processes, and I want to be very clear of all my concerns fit within these areas. First, engagement and consultation must be based on mutual respect. Yet inside council, members of the public who have dared to ask questions have been treated with utter contempt. Not responding to us is a very common occurrence. In my own case, a council staff member in an email falsely accused me of having a mental illness, and that rumour was allowed to spread among staff. I haven't been diagnosed with such an illness, just saying. This is not only defamatory, it is such toxic behaviour. Respect for the public is the foundation of meaningful engagement. And looking back now, I was subject around a water cooler is something that is very interesting and hard to fathom. In relation to my candidacy for the elections, there are around 60 emails between the electoral officer, including the CEO, that show political interference by the officer and staff. Secondly, consultation and communication rely on honest information, especially to elected members. When I raised concerns about the Bella Vista situation in a meeting with Mayor Drysdale in December, He understood that demolition contractors had found issues with the footings. Well, that was news to me. However, when I made a Lagoima request to check the Mayor's information, no information was returned. I knew he was misinformed, but needed to double check. I know Bella Vista like the back of my hand. And I think it's very, very wrong of anyone in council to mislead our Mayor. Elected members must receive truthful documented advice. Without it, consultation is meaningless and communication with the public is based on falsehoods. The third, the public consultation has been deeply undermined by misinformation at public meetings. An example of this is the public meeting, the 20th of February last year for Stop, Save the Otamoto Pool. The CCO, Bay Venues Limited, told the community of 150 at that meeting that the QE2 building was being demolished because it was full of asbestos. Yet the official report says no such thing. It was a standard maintenance report with no issues. I got it checked with a different asbestos company. Commissioner Selwood then stood up at the meeting stating that the pool had geotechnical issues, but no geotechnical investigations had been done. Given the seriousness of this, being a recommendation to commissioners for the long-term plan, something has to change. These false claims were repeated again at meetings with staff from Bay Venues and Spaces and Places. The staff wants are written all over their faces. Council quickly took control of us by setting up the group. They still want the pool gone, and that's very obvious. This was not an honest consultation. It was a manipulation to push through the dream of an aquatic centre at Memorial Park, where they didn't do their due diligence either. Under your own standing orders, consultation must be open, truthful and fair, not designed to manufacture consent for decisions already made. I believe, and I'm sure I'll be knocked back on this, but I believe that most of the elected members have already decided to vote for number 3 for the water issue, and the process is being taken at the moment as a sham. I understand that also allows us, sadly, to increase our borrowings. Council's reliance on poor legal advice, that simply defends the indefensible is damaging the integrity of your consultation, communications and complaints process. It is not good enough to say that we've had legal advice when it is used to deny plain facts. Elected members are often not told the truth or information their mayor wasn't looking at, the mayor wasn't over Bella Vista. The elected members' council consultation process are being compromised by misinformation. I'm asking today for 2 things. The council to change the consultation policy. And I know, Mayor Drysdale, you've written me an email that sets it out, but it's not in the policy of the council. It was your newsstand. So that policy needs to be changed to your newsstand, where you talk about our people. The policy was written by the commissioners, and I'll just leave that right there because it's actually draconian. We need to establish a robust independent complaints process. We need an independent complaints process. At the moment, things go here, there and everywhere. They go to elected members, they go to staff, they go to the CEO, they go everywhere. It is a very poor way to run such a big organisation. Danny Kensian has a case against council that lawyers will be steering you clear of. However, I will be back to you on a separate matter for homeowners of Bella Vista being lied to into taking a settlement. I sincerely hope you won't ignore the communications because they'll be factual, like my last communications that I made to you, councillors, over Bella Vista. I made that approach in good faith, and I have always made approaches in good faith. However, one gets to the end of the tether of that good faith when it is not returned. I'd like to thank you all for listening, and I hope you've got those messages of what I think are needed here. And I don't just speak for myself, I speak for many, many people that I am working with. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Susie, for your time. Has anyone got any questions to ask Susie? All
It's
right.
not a very nice thing to question on, really, when you've had a growling like you got from Margaret as well. I mean, what a morning. Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you very much for your time. That ends our public forum. So thank you very much for everyone that has come to present today, but also for taking an interest in council, and we really appreciate hearing from you all. You're welcome to leave if you want to. We'll also encourage you to stay if you'd like to be part of some of our further business that we're going to talk about today. So it's up to you what you do. So the next item on our agenda is acceptance of late items. And I just note that there's publicly excluded items 11.11, 11.12, appointment to board and appointment of elected members to CCO board supplementary report, and the late public excluded items 13.14, sale of marine precinct legal and settlement update, considered as a late item for inclusion in the agenda and considered at the meeting. The reason they were late is the information was not available at the time the agenda was published. So I therefore ask if I have a mover and seconder to accept the late items and include them on the agenda. They were circulated on the 24th of April. Councillor Schuller, Councillor Taylor, thank you. All those in favour of accepting the late items? Those against? That is carried. Thank you. The next is confidential business to be transferred into the open. Is there any there? No. Thank you. And change to the order of business. I do propose that 11.6 Council and Standing Orders Committee will be our first report. We will, during the day, probably chop and change a little bit through the order, and that is we've got a 1 p.m. We'll be in publicly excluded straight after lunch to discuss Marine Precinct, and there will be probably a little bit of chopping and changing in the agenda. Obviously, there are supplementary agendas. There is a bit to go through, so I will try to give you where we are and the page numbers that apply. Confirmation of minutes. We have minutes of the extraordinary council meeting held on the 11th of March 2025. I ask if there is any corrections to those minutes. There's no corrections, then I recommend that the minutes of the extraordinary council meeting held on the 11th of March 2025 be confirmed as a true and correct record. Do I have a mover? Councillor Taylor will move. Councillor Roseboom will second. Thank you very much. All those in favour? Those against? That is carried. Thank you. Next, we move on to the minutes of the council meeting held on the 24th of March 2025. Again, is there any corrections to those minutes? There's no corrections. I ask for a mover and seconder that the minutes of the council meeting held on the 24th of March 2025 be confirmed as a true and correct record. Councillor Schooler, Councillor Kurak, thank you. All those in favour? Those against? That is carried. Thank you. Final minutes is the minutes of the extraordinary council meeting held on the 25th of March. Again, I ask if there's any corrections to those minutes. If there's no corrections to the minutes, I recommend that the minutes of the extraordinary council meeting held on the 25th of March 2025 be confirmed as a true and correct record. Councillor Crowther, thank you. Got a seconder for that. Councillor Taylor, thank you. All those in favour? Those against? That is carried. Thank you. Next is a declaration of conflicts of interest. Is there any items there may be a conflict? Councillor Taylor. Cool. Okay, because it's in the public, you can push your chair back and not take part, but thank you for that. Again, if there is items that come up during the meeting, please let me know if there is a conflict of interest there. I don't have any deputations, presentations or petitions to accept today, and recommendations from other committees. There is none that I am aware of. Now we move into business, and we are going to start with 11.6. Let me just find out what page we're on. So we are in the supplementary agenda on page 3. Sorry, I'll just get my... Okay, supplementary agenda, page 3. And this was obviously a report brought by myself. So the reason for this is obviously as we've moved through the last couple of months with these new committees, it's really trying to sort out a couple of where best things are dealt with. The main changes is around the CCO monitoring, moving from council to city delivery. Again, that is around putting things where they should be, and the city delivery committee is charged with monitoring. I do note that statements of intent and other bigger decisions around the local government funding agency, etc., will continue to stay with council. This is, for example, today where we're receiving the 6 monthly reports that would shift to the city delivery. Also, just making it clear where some of the major transport projects go. Again, anything that is in process has a business case that has been approved and is funded will move to the city delivery, and anything into the future that may happen will stay with the City Futures committee. There is a few other bylaws was the other major change. So the approving of bylaws will stay with council as is required, but doing all the consultation on bylaws and development and review will transfer to the City Futures Committee. And, obviously being of a whole, I don't see too many issues around major changes between that committee and council, as we will all be involved in the whole process. I think that pretty much covers that, and I'm happy to move the motion there that we receive the council report of standing committees, terms of reference. Acknowledge. Sorry, I will. Is there any further questions before we do move on to the motion? Yeah, Councillor Morris.
Just foreshadowing, I've got a couple of potential amendments for the council to consider.
Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, and in the wording, just got to find where it is. For the City Future Committee, where there's been a change in regards to transport projects, I'm wondering if the wording is intended to be projects where the project purpose, definition, business case and funding are yet to be in place, or is the word or funding? In other words, does it have to meet every single one of those thresholds, or does it just have to, because I guess what I'm looking at is you could have a situation where you could have the, just to be very clear around it, like around the purpose, definition, business case, but not the funding. I just want to be crystal clear on when that transport project will transfer over, because we do have some, like Cameron Road, for instance, stage 2, which, we could have a purpose, definition, business case, but not funding. So would that stay with City Future until the funding is there in the NLTF? Is that just want to be really clear on that.
Yeah, the intention is that basically until a project is going to get underway, it'll stay with City Futures. And as soon as, for example, Turret 15th, where we have an approved business case and potential funding in the NLTP, then that would shift to delivery. Whereas Cameron Road, yes, it will stay in Futures until we have that a business case that's approved and funded.
But almost just for clarity, might just be the way I read it, but I wonder if or might be clearer, because just to be, looking at it a few years down the track, for people to be crystal clear, that's what the intention is. Because you could say depending on how you read it, you could say, oh, we've just got the funding, so we'll shift it over. So I just propose that it be like and or.
Through the chair, if I can make a comment, if it's helpful. So I think that the context of it, it's future strategic and growth related projects. So these are significant projects, they're not minor projects. And you have to have it as a bundle, because you're not going to get funding for those types of projects without really clear purpose definition and clear business case that the elected members have signed off and approved. So that's why they looked at it as a package of 3. And it is really just those big future growth or major strategic projects that impact on the city, to make sure they're strategically aligned with council, what council wants, and they are funded. Those 3 things must go together. If you think about the ones we're talking about talking about projects like Turret Road, connecting Mount Maunganui. It would have been Tauranga Early Works, Padmore Eastern's change. It's that sort of scale. It's not the smaller scale projects that would run through the normal annual plan process and run through then city delivery as a matter of course. It's those strategic projects, which are the high strategic priorities sitting in the transport system plan.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that.
Yeah. Yeah. Councillor Correct.
Question around bylaws. I know there's more specific policy around or recommendations around process, in particular with bylaws. And just considering committees where there are non-elected members making, involved in the development of and making recommendations to council, is that, just checking, is that okay? Yep.
Process perspective, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, the legislation only requires that the final decision is made by council, and that's still provided in this approach.
Councillor Schuller.
Yeah, just one question on key point, paragraph 4 there, key changes, just transferring council-controlled organisations to monitoring to the city delivery. I'm just wondering, in the current annual plan considerations for Three Waters, that'll obviously become if that option was to become a multi-CCO, that becomes a very, very big entity. Would that still be appropriate that it stayed in city delivery? And I just suppose the question is around, is something like that something that we should not be considering as part of this process, because we'll be honest, within a few months.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I'm just, I believe that we can make that decision, I think, as we go. Is that?
I just suggest we actually name the CCOs in the scope so so we don't just say all CCOs, we actually name them, and then we're fine.
Happy to move something when the time is right.
Okay. Yep.
Also foreshadow a change on the delivery committee scope.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, I'm happy to move recommendations as written, obviously being my report, and if I have a seconder on that. Yeah, Councillor Taylor, thank you. I will just ask Councillor Morris to if he could just give us his amendments or potential amendment.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, happy to move a new C and D, which would drop the existing C down to E, if it found favour with the council, and the resolutions with the committee secretary read new C. The committees may approve expenditure or enter into contracts up to a maximum of $200,000 per item or project. Any decision involving expenditure or contractual commitments above this threshold must be referred to the full council for approval. New D, I did a typo there, there's an of, it should be a or in the second line there. And new D, retains responsibility for the development, review and consultation on bylaws at council. And if I have a seconder, I'm happy to give the rationale for those amendments and would request that they be put separately.
Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, in terms of the first resolution, it does seem odd when we have a committee of the whole making decision, but I think we have to acknowledge the fact that these are not just committees of the whole, these are committees of the whole plus. So they are more than committees of the whole. We have appointed members to these committees. And what it does is ensures that there is a distinction between council and the committee and that there isn't scope creep, because my reading of the terms of reference of each committee is that they are quite broad. The power to act is to do anything that's within the scope of the committee. So this puts some guardrails around that and ensures that the committees aren't encroaching into what council should be deciding, in my view. I think it also supports and formalises the Mayor's comments on the 9th of December that the big decisions are made at council. I think this just formalises that by resolution. In terms of D, around the retention of the development of bylaws at council, if coming to council is a rubber stamp exercise, let's get rid of the rubber stamp exercise and just have it at council. And in addition to that, I would say that it prevents relitigation at council if it's all done at council. So rather than going through a committee and then ending up at council and then having the argument again, that removes that step. So D removes relitigation and removes the need for rubber stamp, so that speaks to efficiency of process. And the new C formalises the direction that the big decisions are made at council and put some guardrails around the what that delegation is around committees, because I think it's too open at the moment. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Curran.
Thank you, Mayor Drysdale. Just on the rationale for bylaws being basically managed and recommended at committee level, what was that? What drove that desire to? Because historically it has been with council, specifically because there are around process requirements. No, so it could happily occur at a committee level. That's what actually triggered my earlier question, actually, around the appropriateness.
Through the chair, so has previously generally bylaws are done through what used to be the old policy committee, or so you used to have policies, bylaws, and sort of urban growth. The thinking of it is really just around the trying to manage the council meetings more efficiently, just because hearings and issues and options papers can take quite a long time, and it makes it difficult given generally the volume of information or reports that are on a council meeting, just to keep council more efficient. If you wanted to retain bylaws at council, my recommendation then, you would set a separate council meeting to deal with bylaws rather than have them in the mix with your regular cycle of council meetings, just because you can spend 3 or 4 hours on one item if you've or more if you've got a number of hearings, where it tends to be a bit more manageable through the policy type committee. So that's really all it's about. So those would be your two options. I would think either move it to City Futures or retain it in council, but then set them as separate meetings so it's a bit more easy to manage.
Councillor Schuller.
Just a question to Christine again through that. As Councillor Morris sort of alluded to, in terms of overall efficiency, do you think as written will provide what Councillor Morris is suggesting around a slightly more efficient and a less of a rubber stamping approach, as opposed to just getting on with it once and not relitigating the risk of that?
While it is a rubber stamp, it's generally more, I would not call it rubber stamp, I'll call it procedural generally. And that's sort of no different from, like, you've got other reports today on council's agenda that are more procedural in nature. So that's not unusual. The bylaw development process is quite, you've got your prepare your issues and options paper, then you get to a draft, then you go out for consultation, you'll have your hearings, and then you'll have your deliberations. So there are quite a lot of steps to pump into a council meeting or a series of council meetings. So it's really about just how you want to balance how you use council versus how you use committee. So it is a choice. Yeah.
Yep, Councillor Scholar.
I just, in terms of that, we don't want to relitigate. I believe we did have an extraordinary council meeting recently to hear back bylaws, which I thought was a sensible thing. We are committees of the whole. I support the non-litigation. I would be happy to have council meetings with extraordinary council meetings for bylaws, because I think we are trying to promote a culture where we decide once and we make the decision at the time.
Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, I think the deputy mayor's put it very well, and I think the idea that Christine had to have a separate meeting makes a lot of sense to me. It seems the simplest approach. In terms of the other proposed amendment, I'd support that. I don't have a big attachment to the amount of 200,000, whether it's, you know, $250,000. What I don't really have a strong view on that, but I think it's good to put, I think you said the guardrails there, and to make a bit of a statement saying that council makes the big decisions. So happy to support the amendment.
I think personally, I think 200,000 is too low. I think we're just going to tie ourselves up talking about relitigation. We're going to relitigate every decision effectively, because I'm not sure there's really any contract that's going to come to council under 200,000. In the fact, you know, that's within the delegated authority of our staff and in most situations, and I think we're just going to tie ourselves in knots around what we're actually looking at, and you know, when you're looking at a project, what is 200,000? Is it the initial number, or is it the total project, etc.? So yeah, I think that one I'm not supportive of. I'm happy to take direction on the bylaws. You know, very much, I guess, the reason for putting it out was around that time and efficiency of council, saying, you know, do we need to be going through, you know, all the processes? I guess, you know, those processes have to happen whether they're at council or in a committee, you know, and you know that you go through the developing a bylaw, the consultation, the hearings, and then it's that deliberations. So maybe, yeah, I'm not sure whether we could split the deliberations, for example, so that the hearings, etc., take place in futures, and yeah, be interested to get Christine's take on whether that's a possibility.
Yes, it's possible, as long as, because you've got committees of the whole, it's fine. You can only deliberate if you've actually attended and listened to the hearings, but given you've got committees of the whole, all of the councillors should be around the table, so that would be fine from a process perspective.
Point of clarification, I think we should refer to the committees as more than committees of the whole, because they are. So we have appointed other members to the committee, so it's not just simply a committee of the whole, it's a committee plus.
Yep, Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just on your comments around the expenditure limits and effectively tying ourselves up in tape. If we just always, that's a small number for the council budget. Would you have any other suggestion on a different number or another way to deal with that situation if there was potentially the need for, you know, that to go to council for a higher level financially?
I think there's always the option that the committees can push it up to council if they wish to, and I guess, you know, that's an option. I believe it's also council can also take on anything they want. So if they didn't like a decision of a committee, they could, you know, they could take it up to council. So yeah, you know, I don't know what the number is, but you know, I think when you look at scale of what we do here, in my mind, a major decision is something that's probably you know, $5 or $10 million. I would have thought. You know, anything under that is you know, not minor, but certainly you know, insignificant in a lot of ways. You know, knowing that 1% of rates is about $3.5 million. So that, you know, that's probably starting to get into significant territory once you're committing that sort of money. But yeah, I think 200,000 is much too low for me. Yeah.
To you, councillor Morris, the numbers are quite a long way apart. Any view?
Yeah, I think when you look at the role and scope of the committees, they are quite broad. However, a city futures committee should be looking at planning type scenarios, and a delivery or monitoring committee should be looking at what has been. But what I have seen in my time around this committee is around this council, sorry, and a former committee is a committee instructing staff to expend money. And that was in relation to the Rainbow Crossing on Devonport Road. My objection to that not being a committee of the whole has been overcome, so I'm happy with that. But in terms of the dollar figure, I'm not wedded to that, but I would make the observation that you can't tie yourself up in knots if it goes to council. If those decisions involving expenditure go to council, there's no tying oneself up in a twister scenario. One can do that if you're encroaching on council's role, in my view, at a committee. And when you are making decisions at a committee that should be at council, as the mayor has said, then there becomes the conversation around what should be at council and what should be at the committee. You can avoid having those conversations if it just goes to council.
I think that's probably goes to the discussion, and we're happy to go with as written. Councillor Morris, don't want to. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this in two parts. So I ask all those in favour of C to say aye. Sorry, can we have a show of hands? Those against? Yeah. So that is failed, and then D. I ask all those in favour, please raise your hands. Okay.
Thanks, everybody. And you.
Yeah, I'll be against. That is carried. Thank you. So that now becomes part of the substantive. Now we go back to the yeah.
Sorry, I missed the process. I thought we would agree those changes before we talked further conversation about the substantive, because I just wanted to add one clause into the scope of the delivery committee.
Okay.
That's a further amendment.
It's not an amendment, it's just a change to the scope.
It's just the scope.
It's not a large one, it's just to say that I'd like the delivery committee to set a baseline for reporting, including executive summaries and action schedules.
Okay.
Mover and seconder.
Actual amendment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yes.
yeah. So we've got Councillor Schooler. Councillor Morris is second to that. We'll just get that up.
I haven't actually got it written.
You did in your. Oh, can you not? You can't.
I don't think you can copy in the notes. No.
Yeah, I
So,
can.
to establish baseline reporting requirements. Reporting requirements for committees and council with concise, relevant executive summaries action schedules for all meetings. Sorry.
As the, as the mover, I'm happy to accept that as a. Councillor Taylor, are you, yeah, so we'll put that in, to expedite another, no, that's all good. So now, we'll go back to the substantive. I think for me, we've had a pretty good discussion, around this, and I'm quite comfortable, with where we're at. Absolutely happy to be, led on these, on the different parts here. I think, bylaws at council, that's fine, to keep it there. I don't have anything more to add. Councillor Taylor.
I'd just like to make a comment, and it probably goes to the Councillor Morris's proposed amendment. We have voted for iwi representatives on our committees as voting members. To me, that amendment was a method of working around that structure. So, yeah, not very happy about how it came about, and I think we need to be mindful.
Point of order. There is a section in standing orders that relates to members restating other members' opinions. So I just ask you to reflect on that through the mayor.
I'll withdraw my comment.
Is there any other discussion on this? Okay, if there's no other discussion, we'll put this to the vote. Just make sure we've got the, what is it, we'll just get it clearly how it. So it just needs that.
So we just need to.
And we just need to probably separate that out, or just make it clear that that establish is probably adding to the scope, I think is
that to the scope of the city?
Yeah.
Yeah, with the following amendment.
Okay. Do we need to put scope, or is it city delivery committee? Yeah, okay, terms of reference, yeah. All right. I'll now put that to the vote and ask all those in favour. Those against? That is carried. Thank you very much. Right, now we'll go back to the original agenda. And this is the main agenda 11.1, which is plan change 27. Oh, yeah. Yep.
Like to have a 5-minute break.
Yeah, we'll just just have a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back with 11.1, which is on page 43 of the main agenda. together and re-adjourn. Thank you. Just a note, the live streaming is now live. So that has been sorted. Thank you very much, everyone. And the recording will obviously up until I think for the first item was up and running. So anything before that will be available on the internet. So 11.1 plan change 27 flooding from intense rainfall. This report is looking to make this operative. Maybe invite Janine to give us a very brief overview. We have spoken to this before, so if you just give us a very brief overview, and then we can ask any questions.
Kia ora koutou. So sitting with me, I have Muncie. She's a senior policy planner in my team who has led Plan Change 27. This does have quite a long history and started with some significant flooding events that we had in Tauranga in 2010, 2011, and then 2013. And that set about council looking at how we better manage risk from flooding across the city. And that's where the integrated stormwater project started, which, as set out in the report, has a number of different stages. But the last stage of that report, of that project, was a regulatory response. Prior to that, we didn't have any flooding rules within our district plan, the Tauranga City Plan, and this was Plan Change 27 is to introduce those provisions. So that was notified back in 2020. And has gone on quite a journey with the community, with a large number of submissions and further submissions. And we went through a hearing just post-lockdown. And then in April 2022, we had 3 appeals, and we've been working with those appellants for the last 2 years, more than 2 years now, to resolve the issues. Those were resolved with those 3 main appellants, and the consent order documents were sent to the Environment Court, which we have now received, and they've been signed by the judge. The process from here, now that the consent order documents that are attached to the report are received, is that we make the plan change operative, so it's finalised. Just one thing to note is that the rules have actually had legal effect since notification. So these rules have been in place since 2020. And so the resource consent processes have been working with them. And we have an ongoing flood modelling program to ensure that we continually model our 19 catchments to ensure that the information we have is up to date. So the flooding information in our mapping systems are up to date for the community to understand where the flooding is identified on the property. So happy to take any questions.
Councillor Taylor.
So the last thing you mentioned, the modelling, I think that was one of the appellant's concerns, was that the modelling wasn't up to scratch. Is that, so we've obviously improved it or something?
Yes, and I would say that's probably one of the long-standing, which took quite a long time to work through with the appellants, and that involved having experts from the appellant side and also council to work through how we do our modelling, the information that goes into our modelling, and that was resolved with those appellants through that mediation and post-mediation process.
Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, team, for the work to get to this stage. Absolutely enormous, and going through appeals, and a lot of work behind this document. Going from the sublime to the ridiculous. Looking at this, would it be possible to essentially build a pole house which has got floodable area underneath 300 millimetres or 299 millimetres underneath the entire section? And I'm wondering how that relates to wider comprehensive subdivision consents for large developments. So would that particular situation, where you could end up alongside the Kaituna River building a whole lot of pole houses, would that be overcome through the plan change essentially for something like Te Tumu or the consent process for Tauranga West. Would that sort of ridiculous situation be dealt with there, and it's just the individual people lopping off the back section or something that are dealing with this situation? Could you make sense of that? Gee,
Yes, understood. So there are, when we are doing our greenfield planning, there's quite a different process to our existing areas of the city. So the regional policy statement does require us to model and understand a higher scenario, so a higher climate change scenario, so more sea level rise. So when we are planning for those greenfield areas, we are modelling and we're actually planning for those greenfield that there are no new residential developments that are within that floodable area. So along the Waidel River, for example, along that river margin, we have set aside a large area of open space that will not be built on in terms of residential development. The same with Te Timu along the Kaituna River. There is a lot of planning, and that's where we identify our developable areas and our undevelopable areas. When it comes to our existing areas, it really comes down to the type of flooding, because we can't treat all flooding the same. There might be a flood prone area, so that's just where water is sitting. You might have an overland flow path where water is flowing from A to B, top of the hill to bottom of the hill. And then we have our floodplain. Those are our large floodable areas along our rivers, along our streams, which have really big flows of water and are quite dangerous. And that's where the rule framework treats each of those flooding differently. So pole housing in an existing urban area might be appropriate where you've got a flood prone area, but more discouraged in a floodplain, because it's got the safety of the people and in the house, but it's their ability to be able to evacuate safely as well.
Just a quick question on clarity. I just reading the paper, it's plan change 27, flooding from intense rainfall, but then you just made mention of sea level rise. So is it both, or I'm just a bit of clarity? It's a bit confusing hearing that.
Yeah, so plan change 27 is about flooding from intense rainfall. And the regional policy statement requires us to flood for a 1% event, but it also requires us to take into account climate change. When you talk about climate change, it involves sea level rise, but it also includes more frequent and larger weather systems and events. So when we see the events that have happened in Auckland and Hawke's Bay, those kinds of events are becoming more and more frequent. So Plan Change 27 takes into account a climate change scenario that has more frequent, bigger flood events. So what it means is a 1% event today is different to a 1% event in the future. That 1% event in the future is bigger.
Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Janine, and both of you for the work you've done. I just want to be crystal clear in my mind, and it's probably a bit of a side issue, but in terms of the answer to Councillor Morris, are we saying that if it's a new greenfield development, for want of a better description, then it has to meet the higher requirements, if you like, but if it's a portion of an existing greenfield area that has been through a plan change, it would fit under this. So, I'm thinking out up in Moaway and places like that, there would not be the higher requirements there. Would that be correct?
Yes, that's correct. So you would, basically all of your greenfield areas, sorry, that's quite loud. All of your greenfield areas would have to give effect to Plan Change 27 as it sits, but also all of the modelling we would need to include, for the new ones, a higher climate change scenario.
Okay, is no further questions? Thank you very much for your time, staff. Now, I ask for a mover and seconder Yep, we'll just put it's quite long and quite technical, so. I ask for a mover and seconder, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Crowther, thank you very much. Councillor Taylor, would you like to speak? Councillor Crowther.
Acknowledging the work that's gone into it and I think it was probably from what it looks like sort of helpful to have had the issues dealt with through the legal process. And I know there's sort of concerns in the community around aspects of this, but I think, it's something that's important to get right. And I think it's been a lot of effort put in to try to ensure that has happened.
Is there any other discussion? Anyone else want to speak to it? Therefore, I'll put the motion to the floor as up on screen and in front of you. This is page 43 of the main agenda. All those in favour? Those against? That is carried and now operative. Thank you. We will now move to 11.2. Page 136 of the main agenda. I know Councillor Taylor can move his chair back. So we're 11.2 draft alcohol licensing fees bylaw deliberations. 136 of the main agenda. I think we can take this as read unless you've got something to add to it, Sarah or your team.
I think this is fresh in your minds post the hearings last month, so just here for any questions that you might have.
Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mayor. Just on page 176 of our agenda, there is an audit of the activity. Is that an internal audit, looking at the format of that? It's just response to one of the submitters' queries around how well council is managing its internal processes.
That was one that was provided by one of the submitters as a suggestion, I believe, of what could be done.
It was from Ash.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we haven't done an
No, we haven't done. No, we haven't. No. Yeah, no, that was, I think, a recommendation. So, yeah, my question to you is, before we sort of go down this track, how efficient and effective are we in our alcohol licensing process, and what processes are we going through at the moment to ensure that we are as efficient and effective as possible?
You can see through the paper that we are processing approximately 1,300 applications each year. We've got a small team of 3 inspectors and 2 technical officers that are working through all of those processes and making sure things are flowing quickly between applicants and the decision makers. We haven't had timesheeting in the past, but as part of our efficiency reviews, we are looking at implementing a better understanding of where staff are spending time so that we are accurately invoicing. This is something that we do for building consents and for resource consents, but it's relatively new in this space. So we will be doing that. And the intent is we will bring you that information and that data prior to asking you to set the fees. This, as you know, is just about adopting the bylaw so that you can set fees. Before you set those fees, we would be bringing you that data. So where staff are spending time, how that compares to other councils and the costs for other councils, and whether there's any savings that we can make.
Thank you very much for that. And just obviously just aware that this is only around a bylaw. We're not talking fees today, which I think is a very distinct point that we need to get across. But there is in the consultation, there was a proposal, I guess, around 100% recovery of fees, and I guess that was just as an example of what that may look like. So my question around that is what is that? Is that all the overheads as well as staff time, or is it just staff time? How, what does 100% look like?
The 100% cost recovery that's in the Schedule 1 as indicative fees includes all of the overheads. So it's the whole cost of operating that specific activity. And
just, I know we're not talking fees today, but is that something that we would look at? My understanding is with building consents and there's a set fee, but there's also a time component. So obviously, if you've got a very simple application and it takes less time, would that reflect in the likely fees charged?
We're required to be consistent with the Act, and that does have a number of tiers of complexity. So something that's really low risk is, I think, what we've got currently, it's $368, and a very high risk venue would be at 1,200 at the moment. So that's all based on things like how many people will be at the venue, what type of alcohol is served, what the operating hours are. So that all goes into a matrix, and it allows you to set a fee based on low or high risk.
It would be a set fee, not a time and cost. Yeah. Okay. Any other? Yeah, Councillor Scholar.
Thank you. And just, I guess, further to the Mayor's question about efficiency, 1,300 applications a year from our city, so a number of those will be repeat applications potentially. Are we using AI in that process, or is that part of the plan?
That's a really good question, because it's something that we're looking at right across the regulatory business with resource and building consents as well. Certainly there are aspects of AI that can support the development of reporting, summarising information and drawing information on previous compliance issues. So we are looking at that.
There is also a requirement to actually inquire into each application. So I heard the term rubber stamp being used before. We can't just do that with a lot of these applications. We still have to make inquiries into them, and that still does take time. And I know that's a bone of contention for some people, because they think, well, I'm just renewing the license, nothing's changed. Why does it take as long as it does? But there's other components in there as well with reporting agencies have reporting timeframes that we have to wait for. There's public notices that have a certain amount of time that they have to be lodged for, and we can't advance the application until those timeframes have been met. Yes, we could do more, I believe, within that period as well, but there are those timeframes to consider as well.
Yeah, Councillor Scholar.
And I think I was not anticipating using AI was rubber stamping. I think from the feedback we've got, we had some submissions were about, we need to make sure process is better. I have heard some stories about process not being good. So please do acknowledge that we can improve process, and if we've got technology that enables that, then we certainly are not suggesting rubber stamping. We're just saying, if we're going to charge costs, let's make sure we have reviewed our processes and that we can hand on heart say that our processes are efficient and they need improving is what we are hearing.
Just to follow up, we talk about renewals. Is that controlled by the Act that's got to be every year? Is that?
Once, very simply, when a new license is issued, it's issued for a period of 12 months. And then it comes up for renewal. And when it's renewed, it is then renewed again for a period of 3 years. Sometimes that's shorter, depending on what has happened with the premise in that initial 12 months. But generally, licensees can bank on a 1 year initial and then 3 year renewal each time, with an annual fee that's due every year as well.
Oh, so the annual fee is due even if you're not
coming up for renewal, yes.
And that's sort of to cover compliance, is it?
Again, that's a fee that's outlined in the Act, but yes, all towards going towards our implementation of the Act.
Justification of that annual fee is effectively to fund the compliance costs going forward.
Yep.
Yeah, Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, just in the previously acknowledged context that we're not deciding fees, but just in terms of the background, when we were sent information around the different councils, is it because it's so prescriptive, is it that the large variation in fees around the country is due mostly to just the percentage of cost recovery, or are there other factors that once we work through that process in the future that we would find that, you know, there would be reasons why Tauranga might be higher or lower? In other words, is it solely just, you know, we could adopt 100%, 50%, whatever, or is it that there are other factors at play here?
To the second part of that question, you could adopt 50, 60, 70%. That's the choice that council can make. The differences across the board are ones that we need to interrogate before we ask you to set those fees. We had noticed in some of the information that we sent to you, so for Porirua, whose initial year one fees look quite low, by their third year, so they are phasing in their costs, they're almost identical to our costs. So we'll be looking at how many applications each council process, what their cost recovery charges are, whether it's 50, 100%, and how they're doing that business, because that's really important context for you in setting your fees.
Councillor Scholar.
Sorry, that leads to another one, Sarah. So on the basis there's probably 73 councils across New Zealand doing this, are we copying best practice? Are we going to Porirua or Hamilton or Waipa and saying, how do you do it? How might we improve our process to be better than that? Are we sharing that information across New Zealand?
At this stage, for this purpose, we've just got the fees, if you like. I'm more than happy to be open to us going to some of those bigger councils and seeing how they do it. A lot of it will depend on the number of staff they have, the number of applications they deal with as well. But yes, there is a New Zealand Institute of Licensing Inspectors that our staff are all involved with. They network. There's a district licensing committee network as well, and everyone feeds into that and takes information from it.
I just think I'm encouraging just a little bit of standard practice, and where improvements are made, let's copy if we can. Just that's how process gets better. Thank you.
Yeah, I think agree with that around benchmarking, and let's find out how we sit, you know, compared to other councils around time and efficiency and you know how many applications are being processed. Because I think when we do get to that fees discussion, it's going to be very important that we can reflect and say, well, we are doing it well, and you know these costs are justified. But I think that ends the questions. So thank you very much, staff, for answering all those questions. I am happy to move as recommended there. We've got Councillor Scholar will second. And look, just to be very clear, what we're talking about today. This is around alcohol licensing fee bylaw, and that is effectively at the moment under the Act. We don't get to control what we charge for licensing. We take a figure that hasn't changed in a number of years, and we are obviously rate funding a lot of this activity. So I think this bylaw is a move in the right direction, and the fact that we get to control our own destiny, we decide what we want to charge for that process. And alcohol licensing is obviously while it is a benefit to our whole community, there is people that are profiting from alcohol, and I think it's fair that they do bear the majority of the cost. As I said, we've got to come to a point where we decide what that cost is. At the moment, general rates are covering 60% of this activity, and I don't believe that is correct sort of percentage. I think the challenge to our staff and to our organisation is, if we are going to charge and get at a higher percentage covered by those that benefit from alcohol licensing, then we need to be sure that we are being efficient and those charges are justified. But this bylaw, actually putting in a bylaw and having control of our own destiny, very much support. There is more work to be done around those fees. And I think, there's been quite a direction from the council today around where we need to get to for us to be able to justify that. And that will be a bigger decision, because that is actually the bit that affects the businesses out there, is what the fee is that they pay. This makes no difference today as to what fee they pay. That is a decision probably for another 10 to 12 months in the future, as we look to put that in place for next year, is my understanding. So that is my discussion, but very much support having a bylaw and being able to control our own destiny. Councillor Schooler.
Yes, and I agree. And I think just in terms of the submitters, it's really great that we had that feedback and have been able to take that into account. And yes, I agree, we should be. I think the Mayor's put it very well, but there's lots of work to do before we're actually setting the fees that go along with this bylaw.
Yeah, Councillor Schooler.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I think we made it really clear. I suppose the members of the public listening, or we'll find out about this later. Exactly what we're doing today is to give ourselves control over the process, or better control. Certainly when we go out to consultation, and there will be a lot of interested parties, and there's been some strong feedback. Obviously, a lot of the public have supported this, but from our processes going forward, it'll obviously be very good to include and meaningful consultation with the really interested parties about how we can deliver these services really, really well. So, it can actually be a really collaborative process that gets a great outcome. And I agree with the Deputy Mayor, finding, looking around the country, what's already working, and weaving that in. So when we're ready to go on this, we've got all the relevant information in front of us. Thank you.
Any other further comment? Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mayor. If this bylaw passes today, a report which comes back around the setting of fees, I think it would be useful for the team to consider some of the content of submission 201. It was one of the best submissions I've seen in a while, and having some narrative around some of the points raised in there would be useful for me. Thank you.
Any other further comment? Then I'll just wrap up. Obviously support this. Thank you very much for the consultation. I think we got a lot from both the submissions and from the when people came to present at the hearings. We heard from a number of businesses, and some of those pinch points. So I think it's important that we do work with those people going forward to ensure that we do hear what they're saying, and we do make sure our services are as efficient and effective as possible. And obviously, when we come to fees, that we can justify any fees that we do charge for that. I think, overall, this will be a positive step forward. And I don't support 60% of this activity being paid by the general ratepayer. And I'm not going to commit to a number, but it should be lower than that. And those that benefit should pay more of a percentage of that. But we need to make sure we're as efficient as we can in-house, and that this is a good process where we work together with those businesses that are affected going forward. So now we are on page 136 of the main agenda. We will see the recommendations that are before us. And I ask all those in favour of those recommendations to say aye. Those against? That is carried. Thank you very much. Yep. So Taylor is back. All right, next we move on to 11.3, which is dog registration fee for 2025-2026. Again, just to be very clear, we are looking, the recommendation is looking at an increase of $4 per dog from $125 to $129 for this year. And again, unless there's something to discuss, we will just open the floor to questions. Yeah, Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there a statutory reason why we're making this decision today? I acknowledge that consultation on the annual plan has not concluded yet. It concludes today. We haven't had hearings or deliberations, and I know that a number of submissions relate to the dog licence fee. Is there any impediment to us from a legislative perspective of waiting until those hearings have occurred and then making a decision on this, or do we have to make that decision today?
The dog registration process sits outside, and the decision-making sits outside the normal council processes, just because of the Dog Control Act and the requirement to have a decision in council for setting registration fees for the coming year. We start that registration process on the 1st of June. And so for timing wise and getting ourselves ready, it's really important that we leave this to the last minute so that we can get everything that we need ready to send those letters out. Otherwise, registration is late and it has an ongoing impact.
But the answer is no.
No, and I think what we have heard from a number of dog owners is less about the fee itself and more about the desire to have good dog owner discounts. And that would be something that we would decide on through the funding and financing policy separate to setting our registration fees. There's some decisions that you can make around how you would like the registration process to run, but it's not part of today's decision making.
So the collection of the licence fee, is that from 1st of July? The letters go out in June, but the fee is collected from 1 July?
A dog registration expires on the 30 June, so everybody should technically register their dog by that time. So we have to update our databases now, get everything ready so that we can send out the re-registration forms by 1 June. And that gets us in line so that people can pay by that date.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mayor. If a paper was presented to annual plan deliberations early, would council officers be able to implement that decision quickly before the 30th of June? So if in our deliberations in early May, a paper was brought.
If for consideration, a good dog owner type fee was introduced, we would then have to reconfigure the whole web pages and our databases to try and implement that. It would be very, very tight and would put some stress on staff and the process.
And a follow-up, I think we noted in the paper that we are currently reviewing the dog management policy and bylaw, and that's part of the consideration on how the registration regime needs to run, and we would anticipate that feedback and the good owner discounts, if that was something that council wanted to implement, would come through that to allow the funding and financing policy.
Thank you, Mayor. Would these submissions to the annual plan in relation to this be able to be carried over into that process?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So Crowther.
You think, Sarah, just to clarify, like if we were to decide to give a discount to a certain category, and I know some of the submissions in the annual plan have been for, I think it's worded pensioner discounts or so forth, but other councils have various combinations of factors there. So I'm just I'm struggling in terms of the financial side of it. So you have to set it by a certain date. People have to pay by a certain date. Are we saying if we then go about and saying we would give discounts, that we would intentionally underfund it by making that decision? And if not, how would we not underfund it?
And the decision on discounts, and whether it's a pensioner discount or good owner discounts, is really a policy decision. It's how you want to set up the framework for your registration. This is a implementation decision on what do we charge registration this year. The redesign of that system is something with some feedback from annual plan and looking at how our funding and financing policy would be able to press go on something like that. As Brent has said, we would need to relook at what the likely revenue generated from every single registration would be, how many pensioner discounts we would anticipate, good owner discounts, and what that would mean. So it would drive up other registration fees in order to cover the costs of the whole activity.
Without wanting to put words in your mouth, would it be perhaps fair to say it might be a decision that would be implemented for the following financial year from your perspective?
Councillor Taylor.
In our documentation on page 203, there's a little graph, a table, and it talks about other, including infringement and impounding fees. That seems to have grown dramatically in the last couple of years from, I think it started in 21-22 at 128,000 and we're up to 388. So are our dogs behaving more off the track, or is there something that's happened there to increase that revenue?
We've seen a decrease in voluntary regulation as the fee increases. So as a consequence, we're issuing more infringements for unregistered dogs. And at the same time, we are seeing more dogs being impounded. Part of that is because of the greater number of unregistered dogs. One of our processes is to impound them on occasion. And additionally, increases in the roaming dogs and more aggressive dogs. So we've seen more impounds. So we've generated more revenue in that area.
So from a workload point of view, what is this non-compliance adding to our workload? Is it?
Yes, it certainly does add to it. It's because they are the more difficult customers, generally speaking. We have issued a lot more search warrants this year, which means going onto people's properties and with the police to capture some of these dogs. So it does increase our workload and the difficulty of that work.
Councillor Correct, did you have a question?
The Crowther asked the same question.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Schuler.
Yeah. You, Mayor. I'm just going to find. I did ask the, so yeah, thanks for the report. I did ask the other councillors this morning, but I either didn't listen to them or didn't get the answer I wanted. Just the general rate, and point 4, the general rate contribution towards the cost of dog control recognises the public good element of the service. So I don't understand the public good element of the service. It'd be good to understand that, because I suppose the question is, why wouldn't we be going for 100% and as opposed to 90-10? So just, a bit of clarity on exactly what that means for my dimness. Thank you.
Having dogs registered, known dogs, keeps the city safe. Having the activity where we can impound roaming dogs and dangerous dogs keeps the city safe. Our litter bags that allow people to clean up keeps the city tidy. It's a little like the argument, I think, dog owners say we don't have children and so they don't use parks, so why should we be paying for public parks? It just says the general public good of cleaning up and keeping people safe.
It's way better than Councillor Crowther's answer. I just want to say thank you.
I just had a question because we talk about, just on the back of that, we talk about the 10% from general rates, but then if we do go to table 1 on page 203, we've got general rates at sort of 20%. So just interested in how that sort of equates.
Yeah, apologies for the confusion in that table. So that relates to the whole animal services activity, which includes all the work that we do on other animals. I think bees and pigs and chickens in the urban area is the whole activity costs. What we recover from dog control is 90% of those costs. So the table doesn't split that. I'm sorry.
90% of dog specific costs are covered by dog registrations. Okay, that's perfect. Thanks for clearing that up. Councillor Taylor.
I have to ask, so what's the chicken cost?
Like dog registrations and incidents, it's very hard to predict what we're going to get on any given year and what keeps Brent's team busy. But we might have chickens in parks that people would like us to remove. We may have pigs in people's neighbourhood and they don't like pigs next door. And we have a lot of bees. And you'd be surprised how many people complain about bee poo.
Okay, any further questions? All right, thank you. Appreciate your answering of those questions. I'll now put if we just put this up. So the resolution is effectively receiving the report, setting the dog registration fee for 25-26 at $129, and subsequent penalty fee being 150% of the normal fee, and notes around some of the answers to the questions that the dog management policy and bylaw of keeping animals that will be scheduled for review later this year, and an invitation to participate in the online pre-engagement surveys ahead of those that dog management policy and bylaws. So I think that answers a number of questions, and I think we've heard some of the questions today around some ideas around whether we should be looking at some slightly different ways, and I think that's probably very clear that that's when we should be doing it as we review those bylaws. I asked for a mover and seconder of this, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Schuler, thank you very much. Councillor Taylor, would you like to speak?
Yeah, just through consultation on Saturday, I was talking to a lady about the potential for discounts for the good dog owners. I know there are reasons why it's difficult to implement, but I think it is something that we need to consider. And at least run the ruler over it just to see how it fits.
So Shula. No, Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not going to move a resolution or an amendment, but I will be looking for a reference to the submissions that were made in annual plan when we come to that decision. I think we'd be barking mad not to.
Like what you did there. Any other discussion? Yeah, I think for my 2 cents, yeah, I think we do need to look at this and obviously take into account what people bring up through that annual plan process. Obviously, in this case, we're raising the dog registration fee $4 from last year. So I think there's nothing major in that, but I agree we can look at this later in the year and see whether we're doing it as best we can. And just going back to what we've spoken about with alcohol licensing, again, let's have a look around the country and see if there's anyone doing it particularly well and maybe compare ourselves. But I think the fees do look within cooey of what a number of other councils around the country do charge and are doing. So I'm quite comfortable we're in the ballpark at least. Yeah, Councillor Shula.
To finish here, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think happy as it's all moved and proposed. The interesting comment, I suppose, and do have sympathy for dog owners, and dogs obviously provide a huge amount of comfort for a big portion of the population, older people, elderly, as we've heard, and asking or looking for in the future, cheaper or discounted rates. But as it stands at the moment where we are this year, I think that's late in the game, but something certainly for the future. If the council assumes all owners are responsible unless proven otherwise, they prove otherwise when they don't pay or don't look after their dog. So going forward, I would have no problem if we increase the fine side of the equation to support good owners. But that's a future discussion. Thank you.
Right, now put the resolution to the council as on the screen. I ask all those in favour. Those against? That is carried. Thank you very much. We now move to 11.4, which is Land Transport Management, Time of Use Charging Amendment Bill, TCC submission. Again, this is on the main agenda, page 210. What we are discussing today is a Act of Parliament, which is currently being discussed, and Tauranga City Council feeding back into that submission. So I think we can take that as read. We've already had a look at this to form some of the views, and I'll ask if there's any questions for staff on this. Councillor Crowther.
Got a few, if that's all right. Can you clarify on the comment on 3.3, the often quoted $10 billion, just because not so much for the recipients, but for the people who read this from the public, does that include the RONS funding, like all the RONS projects, the 5 billion, like is half of it for RONS roughly, and is the other, or is it just 10 billion that is needed in addition to what the government is investing in roads of national significance?
Yeah, so that was just a very broad estimate, and the purpose of putting that into the submission was just to demonstrate the sheer substantial investment that's required. So yeah, it does include the RONs. It's very broad brush, very, very high level, and it's just trying to demonstrate a point around.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
yeah.
I guess I feel it could be helpful just to put in brackets, including RONs, just so people in the community get a sense of the scale. We've still got 5 billion non-RONs today, which is a big number. And if I may have another question. Oh yeah, on the 5.4.2, it talks about social license and says how equity impacts will be assessed and mitigated, particularly for low-income groups and access to cultural sites. And I don't have a problem with that, but I'm just wondering why was cultural sites singled out? Why not for things like hospitals and medical facilities or such like?
I think that was more of an example of changes that could be made to enable a scheme to be designed according to different requirements. It wasn't meant to be set in stone that there were more examples than anything else. So I could update that to reflect that this is specifically as per examples, but
yeah,
not
maybe
limited to.
along the lines of cultural, medical, and other socially important sites. So I don't know. You can come up with the reading. And another one I had was I'm a little concerned if, I'm expecting the government to necessarily listen to every little thing that we say, but were it to play through, you'd have suggested use of revenue under 5.5.2, and it talks about allowing investment in public transport, active travel, and urban improvements beyond just land transport activities. My view is that that's too broad, and I mean, my personal view would be to put something like urban mobility improvements. But to me, it's sort of the social license side of it would come back into that. If our community was seeing that we were advocating for time of use charging potentially to fund urban improvements, I think they would be quite horrified. So I'm not sure what was intended, but my own thoughts are that something along urban mobility improvements, which would have flexibility in the meaning, it could include footpaths, it could include other placemaking projects that help to enable mobility, but to take it completely away from transport and mobility seems a little bit worrying to me.
We could use the word movement because I think it's a bit broader than just mobility. Sometimes that's seen as a bit narrower, so maybe urban movement improvements.
Okay, yep, very happy with that. I'm going to scroll through these little green things we've got here. So the definition of region 5.5.3, and it says should be clarified to ensure local. Actually, I've got my little things are blocking it, but I think it's to ensure local investment benefits are focused clearly. I'm sort of thinking to ensure local and sub-regional investment benefits, because in a sense we're getting into the definition of region, so we might as well be a little bit more precise and say that there are some local benefits, there are also some sub-regional benefits, and there will no doubt be some regional benefits. And I think that's the issue. That my view, and obviously others around the table might see it differently, but it's to tease out where the benefits are and to reflect that in the legislation.
Yeah, okay, I'm happy to add sub-regional in there as well, unless anyone else has got any other comments to that.
Well, I think for me, if it's brought into our local, if it's charged in our local authority, then it should be invested in our local authority. Obviously, if it's for example on T&L between us and Western Bay, then that would be shared from a sub-regional point of view. But I think we've got to be very careful. We don't want to charge our people to be paying for Rotorua, for example.
I guess my point was, I think that's already acknowledged in putting local, but to put sub-regional addresses it from the other point of view, which is that Western Bay people could get no benefits at all, yet they could be paying a significant amount of funding depending on where the charging points are. I mean, we don't know how it's going to work, but I think there are some transport planning activities that are sub-regional in scope, some that are local. And to me, what I would think would be good is without knowing what's going to come out of this legislation, it's possible you would have some local charging that was related to local benefits and costs, and you'd have some that would be sub-regional. I think they should both be addressed at the respective levels.
Happy to tweak that. I can't remember exactly where it was, but there was another comment in there that we did talk to around the requirement for the benefits to be, or the investment to be realised within the vicinity of a scheme rather than across the whole broader region. So I hope that covers your point.
Any other, Councillor Schuler?
I suppose clarification for Councillor Morris, the primary, sorry, Councillor Morris, I'm just getting you confused with Councillor Crowther. So not a question of staff, but I don't know who'll come the answer, but we're talking about congestion primarily, aren't we? Time of use to satisfy, a lot of people on the roads at the wrong time. So we've got people from Western Bay coming in. So I think that's probably with where this focus is at. I'm not as concerned about that side of it as perhaps you are.
Councillor Correct.
As pointed out by Councillor Schuler, any scheme, the desire would be to reduce congestion. Obviously, that's what it's all about. So I've got a concern that potentially a government could impose a time of use charge more focused around revenue generation rather than congestion relief. And so I'd like to see something in there where the minister has to be satisfied and confident that the imposition of a time of use charge results in congestion reduction, and actually quantify it and have a certain percentage of congestion reduction. And if that isn't achieved once it's implemented, then it should be removed, because the last thing I want is just another revenue generating device. I mean, we've got plenty already. I'm not sure how you'd word that, but if that's supported by others here, I certainly would like to have something in there to somehow control the purpose of the charge, to really focus in on congestion relief rather than revenue generation. And also, given the TNL, potentially a charge could be put on the existing road, say the Wairau Bridge or elsewhere, to try and deter usage of that road. Like the TNL, if the toll is too high, and this has been submitted previously by this council around the level of toll and the deterrent factor, or what's the term for it, where they choose diversion factor. Thank you, Christine. And if it did create too much diversion, potentially NZTA might think, well, it'd be nice to actually put a congestion charge on the existing route, because it could still be a congested road if too many people didn't take the TNL. So somehow incorporate that in. I'm not sure how, but I wouldn't like to see that happen either. So it's good to get in an early stage, try and factor some of the stuff in to deter those scenarios should they occur. I'm confident they won't, but what I'm saying is potentially they could.
Okay, to those couple of points then, we have written in the submission that we want more clarity from the bill in terms of interaction with current tolling legislation bill. And I think that goes to your second point, that there isn't. Yeah, in terms of interaction around expectation on whether or not tolling would still be carried on through the existing legislation, in addition to any potential new time of use charging.
That's a different point. on the second point, it's around usage of a scheme to deter usage of an alternative route to a toll road, to try and push people into using the toll road, which is a bit slightly different.
Yeah, okay, so I'm just trying to think how we
I'll
would
just leave it
word,
with you.
yeah.
To think about.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In terms of the other comment you mentioned around congestion, and once a certain level is achieved, removing the toll, removing a time of use charging. The current bill is actually quite silent on any particular targets or levels, I guess, and there's probably good intent for that, because it would vary hugely by region. So we're expecting further guidance to be provided that would be separate to the bill. If you so wish, I can look at trying to incorporate something to that effect, but I should imagine that that would still be deemed to be outside of the remit of the bill.
So just to clarify that, is the bill quite clear on Councillor Kurak's point around that the purpose of the charging is to ease congestion? Is that?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is clear on that. Revenues mentioned, but it's actually clear that the bill is there to try and encourage better use of existing networks through congestion reduction. Yeah.
Councillor Kurak, yeah.
Concern if it was once the scheme was implemented and it only delivered a 1% reduction in congestion, but they were collecting, $100 million, it wouldn't seem fair and reasonable as something to reduce congestion. Something would be more cost effective. Sure, it generates revenue, and I'd love to ensure that that does return back to the people here that pay that revenue, but yeah, it's a whole different scenario. So introducing some measure, like say a minimum of 5% reduction in congestion otherwise, moving that charge. Because at the end of the day, well, this is actually when I speak to it.
Yeah, just on that note, I realised an error in the submission at the front. We said we don't want to, you don't want to do an oral submission, so I'll change that and state that you do want to do an oral submission based on the submission. So apologies for that error. So in terms of that comment, is there an agreement that I make some changes to include that in the submission?
I certainly agree with it. I think it's really important that we actually know we are purposefully, that there's an ability to measure whether we've been effective in bringing in charges and being able to do something about it if we're not.
Councillor Schuler.
I suppose from the other side of that, though, is if you're building these roads of national significance, I'm sure the business case before they started would be factoring in a benefit of way more than 1%. So I'm not sure we'd even be here if, what you're talking about, a 1% change. I just don't think that would even be a realistic number to put, or even 5. I'm sure the whole design process of this is that we get way better than 5%, improved. So yeah, I'm not sure I agree.
Well, if 5% is easy to get, they won't mind putting it in.
Point is it even relevant?
I could put something in qualitatively. I don't think that they would agree to a percentage, because I think it would just vary too much by region and even potentially by corridor to make that call.
Yeah, I think a direction that we want, like that it is actually effective, is probably the. If it's not effective, then it is just another toll, effectively. So Crowther.
One more. 5.2.10, it makes some good points around the bill clarifies the scheme is required to consider affordability, dependent road users and behaviour change, and it could emphasise the need for schemes to focus on ... I guess for me, I kind of see one of the most crucial things is, unless it's just going to be a tax on people, we have to provide alternative modes. And so the funding of public transport is the big one that's normally addressed internationally with us, and it has been mentioned in the proposed submission. But I think in that area there, sort of upfront when it's talking about what the bill has and what the bill hasn't got, to me that's a logical place that I would think it could be added, or alternatively under 5.3 to emphasise it a bit more, talking about frequent and reliable public transport needs to be available before any such scheme. But either of those two options, whatever you think is best, I think just to highlight that as a fundamental issue for Tauranga, because we're in the in-between area, but we're not a major metro who will be given billions of dollars of funding, but we are not a tin pot little town. So we are potentially going to be caught in the trap that I see could come our way if we're not careful.
Okay, thank you. I could highlight that by bringing it up into the section 2, which is the overview, where there's 3 key points that were highlighted. I could bring that in as an additional one.
If others are
that's in
comfortable,
agreement.
with that. I mean, I'd certainly think that would be really helpful, because it does highlight the inconsistency between the government treating us as a tier 1 metro city, but not funding us for public transport of any significance.
Right, is that all the questions? If that's all the questions, then can we just have the recommendations? I'll just make a comment that would be around, accepting that there's a number of comments today that will go into the submission.
The change being to say with amendments delegated to the General Manager, Strategy, Growth and Governance, and then I'll just ensure that what you've talked about today is incorporated in that, if you're comfortable.
Yep, we could have a discussion.
I guess, I don't want to put it on staff to have to be in a position to try to determine what we're wanting. So but I'm thinking one of the fundamental issues is Tauranga City Council supporting the general intent of the bill, or are we acknowledging it? And I guess I don't feel we've had as a council a discussion, certainly not a public discussion, around the pros and cons and how far we would want this to go, and if we were writing the legislation, all that sort of stuff. So to me, it would be ideal if the number 2.1 was TCC acknowledges the general intent of the bill, so it keeps it neutral. It shows we're understanding what's going on. We're not unsupportive, but we're not necessarily supportive of the general intent, because I don't think it's quite clear yet to me what that general intent, how it will play out. So I don't know if anyone has a problem with that, but to me that would be a final change that I think could be helpful to signal to the community that we are engaging well with government on it, but we're not positioning ourselves anywhere at this stage till we have a formal discussion around it.
Councillor Schuller.
Question, Councillor Crowther. So, but if you just read below that, so if you're having a play on words between acknowledge and support, but then just go through those, maybe you want to go through those next 5-6 points with us. If they are all things that we support in general, then would we not be happy to leave it how it is? Just have a quick check. And if there's an area in there that you're not happy with, maybe you could be specific why we would change the wording.
Be open to this. I guess I was thinking, for the sake of simplicity, to sort of, you could have a full stop. In particular, we support or something, if there were things in there that everyone felt they could support. But I guess just to support the general intent of the bill might be, I suspect, a step too far based on some conversations I've had.
Yeah, I guess my view is I do support the general intent of the bill, and to Councillor Schuller's point, if you look at those, you know, do I support the potential role in addressing peak congestion and improving reliability? Yes. Do I support enabling current transport infrastructure to be more effective and efficient in terms of vehicle throughput? Yes, I do. Enabling local authorities to be involved in the design of a scheme that is fit for purpose. You know, so I support all those intent. You know, at the moment we don't have a way to control, and we've already spoken about having ways rather than trying to build ourselves out, because we don't have $10 billion to build all the required infrastructure that we need. So we need alternative tools in order to maybe be able to do something. It's kind of like water meters, you know, have been very successful in limiting the amount of water, which means that you can build less water treatment plants. So, you know, it's the same sort of thing. Can we use our current assets more efficiently? And I believe that this is one way to do it. So my personal view is, yes, I do support the intent of the bill. I don't support the way that they go around everything, and that's, I guess, what the submission speaks to. But yeah,
It's just a response. I suppose from my point of view, I understand, and I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Mayor, and I understand there'll be others around the table who might well have that view. But I guess I was trying to find a way for there to be broader support for this, which would not take away anything from the support for the, you know, the work that's been done, the submission, conveying things. I mean, if it has to be a sort of split vote on it, I guess that may be the case. But to me, it would be better at this point to say, what is it that we do support? And I think some of those things there, you know, it would be great. It would be great to have more efficient transport infrastructure. I don't think many people would have a problem with that. But I think the word general intent, I mean, I'm personally not there yet. And I'm as I say, from conversations, I'm not sure everyone around the table is there yet.
Okay, I'm just confused because the general intent of the bill is to reduce congestion. So,
I mean, I don't want to go off on a big, like there are a number of ways you can do that. To me, I see that this could well be a blunt tool, because the experience internationally is that works in certain situations, and there is a distinct lack of evidence around whether it works, where there are no good alternatives. And I would argue Tauranga might well be one of the better test cases for that. So if the general intent of the government is that a city like Tauranga, with very low levels of investment in public transport, ends up putting a high level of pricing to try to reduce a congested roads that are caused by the government's growth policy, effectively. You know, when you look back over your years, Councillor Kuraki, you know, what has not been funded when it's been promised. You know, to me, I would say it would be better if the council said to the government, we support part of this, we support part of the intent of it, but I don't support the general intent, which seems to be completely isolated from the fundamental issue, which is they're not properly funding growth, and therefore we have congestion.
Councillor Kuraki.
Well, when you look at schemes such as London, which is effective and the charges are very high, but you can't compare that to Tauranga. London has got an amazing public transport network. In fact, it'd be foolish for any normal person to take their car into the CBD. Absolutely foolish. But here, most people don't have a choice. They have to take their car in. So it becomes a real burden on the people that don't have easy access to public transport, can't afford to pay any more to get themselves to work in terms of another tax. They're already living week to week, where, you know, some people might say, yes, I'm in support of this because they can afford it. What's a few dollars to get to work? If they can get to work, you know, 5-10 minutes quicker. But the cost of that is some poor bastard, I'm sorry, take the word back, some more less fortunate person there that has no choice but to change the time of travel, which could be a huge inconvenience, simply because they have not got the means to pay the additional cost because they're living week to week. And this is where the sort of congestion charge really affects many in the community, and they just feel more disenfranchised. So there are other means to address congestion, and this is one I don't really support, and I'm with you on that, Councillor Crowther. Thinking of those people who will be really disadvantaged and inconvenienced. No, we're not speaking to it. I just thought I'd express that in response to Councillor Crowther's view.
Councillor Taylor, you.
I'd like to move the motion as recommended.
I'm happy to second it. Any further discussion? Councillor Taylor, do you want to talk to it? Or?
Sorry, just make the comment that we're not actually deciding whether we're having congestion charging just yet. I think this is a submission to a piece of legislation going through Parliament. We will have further discussions, obviously, when it does become something we want to implement in the city or not. So happy that we have those discussions and that these things are taken up at that point.
I'll reserve my right. And Councillor Roseburn.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to support Councillor Kodak and Councillor Crowther's concerns around the unique state that we are in as the city of Tauranga. We currently have 2 active gantries. We're going to have 2 more active toll road gantries, and part of the legislation governing use of toll roads is a viable alternative free road or access in and out of your city or around your city. And this is an opportunity, this time of use could potentially end up doing exactly what Councillor Kodak has intimated, that we're going to be charging the free alternative route will end up being charged. And Tauranga is quite unique, and we're split by Ruddy Great Harbour, and we've got very limited means of getting around it. And we're currently pushing forward a business case for a large roading development, Turret Road, 15th Ave, which is going to put huge restrictions on our local travel, which is going to force people in different directions. And based on the timing of when all these happen, people are going to be forced onto Ontario Road, and not knowing the timing of this legislation and when it becomes activated, when will it be applied, and is it going to be left entirely up to whatever government or council of the day is here when they choose to implement it or not, as to the impact it's going to have on the local residents of Tauranga? We need to be very clear of the risk. Agree. I like the intent of time of use, but I don't think the city of Tauranga should be a trial basis for it in the current context that we're currently dealing with, the volume of roading infrastructure that's in front of us now. Thank you.
Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I potentially could have supported the submission if it were worded that Tauranga City Council acknowledges the general intent of the bill, but I don't support the general intent. I may be able to be convinced, that tolling or time of use charging on a new road or an increased level of service is appropriate in the city, maybe a ring road, for example. Not convinced that enabling or writing to government and submitting that we support time of use charging is in the interests of our residents. And as Councillor Kurak mentioned before, around people who are living week to week, paycheck to paycheck, we are in a cost of living crisis, and paying for time of use charging is just another naked, dirty cash grab from central government, in my view. And why I say that is because in the bill, it's not clear as to whether that money is ring fenced for a particular project, and it's not clear that the proceeds of a time of use charging on a local road in Tauranga City doesn't disappear off to funding, in an extreme example, an improvement to the Napier Topol Road, which is within the Bay of Plenty region, a small slither of it next to the Rangataiki pub. Very good pit stop if you need one there. So I don't support that. I also reflect broadly on the concept of time of use charging. And again, Councillor Currack alluded to it. London is a city of 9 million people. It is a city which has a tube which was built by Great Britons back in the 19th century. It is a city with an effective bus network. It is a city with an effective cycle network. It is a city many, many times larger, both in geography and in population, than tiny little Tauranga. And I think, to quote a former representative in this place, at times we need to actually be big enough to realise that we are small. We are a small town at the bottom of the world. We are not a major world city. We have 160,000 people, not 9 million. We are only going to be we're still going to be less than 200,000 people in the 2040s, for goodness sake. We are a small town. Let's realise that and acknowledge it. Yay, we can be aspirational, but let's have a little dose of reality here. Riffing on some comments from one of our local MPs who said that Tauranga City Council doesn't have a revenue problem, it has a spending problem, quote, end quote. I would very much say the same thing about the Crown. The Crown's revenue has increased by 126% since 2010. The Crown's spending has increased by 80% since 2017. The current Minister of Finance, Nicola Willis, is spending and borrowing more than Grant Robertson. So if we're talking about, having an expenditure and revenue problem, the government has a spending problem, doesn't have a revenue problem. And the fact that this bill enables money to go into government coffers from our residents, some of whom are struggling. Let me be clear. Personally, if I wasn't representing my community, I'd be really happy with a congestion charge because I'd just go to work and wherever the heck I want, when I want. But there are people out there, and a huge majority of people out there in a cost of living crisis who would bear the brunt of this decision, this naked cash grab. It's not just about congestion. Let's not fool ourselves. Let's not be disingenuous. It's a naked cash grab. And those people are going to bear the brunt of it. Circling back to the intent of the resolution, that's why I can't support the general intent of the bill. Philosophically, ideologically, and morally, I oppose it.
Do you want to have an amendment? Propose an amendment?
No, I'm just happy that, Mr. Mayor, that you're perhaps giving the submission to Wellington, not me.
Councillor Schuller.
Thank you, Mayor. I suppose just to start, my question to Councillor Crowther earlier wasn't necessarily disagreeing. I was just, whether we're wordsmithing, and this will potentially go to Councillor Morris. I know which one I've got now. My glasses, new glasses, you may not have noticed, but I've got you both clear right now. So, again, for myself, if the support of this goes through, if we wordsmith and say acknowledge or I can't remember Councillor Morris's word. If that made the difference to bring you on board, I'd be more than happy. I suppose the flip side of the discussion to counter the concept of cash grab and, that potentially if building roads cost a lot of money, takes a lot of time, expanding roads, adding an extra lane, building another lane of a bridge does take a huge amount of cost. And so when you started to talk about the true cost to people, and we've already know that I think tomorrow night myself and Councillor Crowther are going along to a meeting in regards to 15th Ave, Turret Road, and just the concerns that the roadworks are going to have on that community. So if you flip the coin and you look at the other way, and there was some form of incentive or disincentive to make someone leave home half an hour earlier or half an hour later in this small town, I don't even know why we're talking about London, to be frank. No one's ever considered we're the same as London. If that makes a material difference, that's a good thing in my mind. An hour here or there, I know it can have an impact. Let's not separate the cost of this versus the intent we're trying to do is to, and one of our stated, I don't even know the word, the stated goals for us is make better use of what we've got. So this is a vehicle to potentially do that. And if I could leave home a half an hour earlier, half an hour later, or an hour, and that did mean that the drive into town across Turret Road and 15th Ave went from 30 minutes to 20, I think that's a win. So I probably have a different view. I respect the view across the table, but I think, I think we should support the submission and deal with some of the detail further down the line. Thank you.
Schooler.
I agree we need to be utilising our assets better. I agree that roading is such a huge cost that this may be going somewhere towards it, but I can't let the comment go, Councillor Schuler, that we've got to remember that some of us get the advantage of being able to leave half an hour early because we start a job early, but quite a lot of people don't get that advantage. They are starting at a time that they have no influence on. They are dropping off kids somewhere, picking them up. So an hour difference in timing is actually quite important. So I think we've got to be careful not to generalise who can afford congestion charging and who it impacts. And I think that's something I've heard a lot better today. On that, I do support the ability to influence people off roads, but perhaps we haven't had the bigger discussion to say, is this the right way to do it?
Okay, is that everyone? So I think what we'll do is we'll put this motion to the floor. Obviously, if it's not successful, yes.
Sorry, so just because this was either, these are the changes we're making and we've moved that quite a lot to say, did we support it in the first place? So can I just ask, if Tauranga City Council decides not to make any submission, what is the impact of that on whether that's accepted around the country or not? Do we have a view on, by being silent, are we actually damaging our case even more?
I think by being silent, we don't have an opportunity to have input into a bill which is likely to go through. And so this is like we ask for people to submit to us. It's our chance to submit to government and hopefully have some control in the process. And obviously if the bill, I don't support the bill as it stands right now, because it's very unclear as to where money's going, who has the ultimate control. So I'm supporting this on the proviso that they listen to some of our feedback. So yeah, I think it is important that we do submit. And I think we'll put this motion to the council with, obviously, I think we've heard very clearly that potentially people would support this with a change of acknowledges the general intent rather than support. So I think that can be foreshadowed to anyone that maybe doesn't support the original motion. So we'll put as written. Yeah.
Your comment there too, I think point 233 in terms of us specifically speaking about what we don't necessarily, we want clarity on is all revenue from a scheme after operational costs should be managed by the local authorities. So in terms of some of that broader context, that we do have the right to manage the revenue for our benefit, not going out to the wider, just to.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just a question of clarification. Is your proposal to change 2.1 TCC supports the general intent of the bill to TCC acknowledges the general intent of the bill?
Sorry, so right now, we'll leave it as supports and see whether we have support. Okay, well, if yeah, I guess from probably what we've heard around the table, yeah, I think it's probably more supportive if we acknowledge the general intent. I think everyone will support that. Okay, we'll make that change then. So we're voting on TCC acknowledges the general intent rather than supports. And I now put this recommendation or motion to the floor. Welcome Councillor Baker. Ask all those in favour. Those against? That is carried. Thank you. So straight after lunch, we are going to be in publicly excluded. I just wonder if we move to publicly excluded now. Yep, happy to. Councillor Schooler, Councillor Crowther, and all those in favour.